Spy Indifference. Florentino Aspalaga, a Cuban intelligence officer stationed in Bratislava in Czechoslovakia, was publicly known as a businessman. He defected from Cuban intelligence circle and joined the CIA. For his first encounter with his role model nicknamed the Mountain Climber, he spilled the beans and unveiled more than dozens of double CIA officers. A few days later, Fidel Castro published a documentary showing CIA officers working for Cuba. The world's most sophisticated intelligence service has been hacked for years by the Cubans, casting corruption and dishonor in Langley. The same trend was also noticed in the CIA Eastern European Division based in East Germany, where most intelligence officers were all double agents working for Moscow. Getting to know the Führer. Meeting between Neville Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, and Adolf Hitler, the German Chancellor, to dissuade him from invading Czechoslovakia. He was impressed by the Führer and saw a man who did not relent on his words. He met a man full of excitement. History has shown that Chamberlain misread Hitler. Not just him, Halifax, the British Foreign Minister, also did. The UK Ambassador Anderson too read Hitler wrong. But when Winston Churchill came into picture, he understood that Hitler was a liar and he never met with him. People struggle to grasp the real first impression of a stranger. The stranger's character, intent isn't easy to be read. When you misread someone, it could lead to catastrophic consequences such as a breach of agreement, a country invasion, or a world war. This is where the illusion of asymmetric insight comes in. It is when we think we know others better than they know us. We think we're nuanced, and stranger is easy to understand. Default the true. The shooting down of Hermanos al-Riscate and the involvement of the Cuban Queen, a spy working at the Defense Intelligence Agency, GIA, who arranged set up the Cuban explanation of the incident, and she disappeared from the U.S. Cuban arranged to have public opinion with them as cast the failure of the U.S. government after being warned about a possible shooting down of a U.S. private plane on international space. Ana Belén Montes, the Cuban Queen, was questioned by Scott Carmichael, the GIA counterintelligence investigator, and all suspicions were turned away from her. Years later, she was arrested with overwhelming proofs of contact with her Cuban handlers more than 300 times. It shows how difficult it is to identifying lies. Tim Levine's study shows that only 54% of the time we can identify lies. We always assume that we are dealing with truthful people. When we don't have enough evidence about a lie, we doubt, and doubt triggers disbelief. The Holy Fool. Bernard Madoff's case defied all Wall Street investigators who didn't see anything wrong with his organization. The Security and Exchange Commission, SEC, couldn't put its hands on Madoff's fraud. No one knew he was history's greatest conman. Defaulting the truth is a major problem when it comes to finding a lie. When we go with the odds, we default the truth. That's why we need a holy fool sometimes to say it loud and shake up the odds to expose the naked truth. In Bernie Madoff's case, if he had been called out by an holy fool investigator, he would have been exposed and people would have known about his fraudulent empire. Fear of repercussions also could be the reason why some people prefer to default the truth. It's a tricky situation. Case study: the boy in the shower. The Jerry Sandusky's case made the news as the nation learned about a Penn State assistant football coach who was sexually assaulting his own players who were all minors. This situation was covered up by the leadership of the university. Sandusky was convicted of 45 counts of child abuse and sent to jail. Sandusky's life shows no red flag as he and his wife Dottie adopted several children, and he has always been around children. But 2 cases against him was signaled before the incident that got him to jail, and no one paid serious attention to those claims. The truth was defaulted again. Mike McQueary, the assistant coach who reported Sandusky to the school authorities, should have gone to the police, especially as the school didn't took the matter to the next level. At any event, this case is no different from the Larry Nassar's case. Nassar, a U.S. gymnastic team physician, was also on the same register of child sexual abuse. It took years to bring him to justice as Nassar denied all previous accusation, casting doubt to victims' testimonies. Once again, the truth was defaulted. Even surprising, in both cases, they had some of their victims defending them during their trials. Transparency. The Friends fallacy. In facial action coding system, FACS, every one of the 43 facial muscles expresses a meaning. And every muscle corresponds to a number that can be decoded by psychologists. Any feeling that comes from your heart is explicitly conveyed in your facial expression according to FACS. The person's facial expression is transparent. It is a crucial tool that we use to comprehend strangers. Facial expression is a universal code of showing how a person really feels inside. But in some cases, in some part of the world, some emotions aren't shown the same way. Even within a culture, some variances also can be observed. There are slightly variations, but at the end, the vast majority have the same emotional expression, and we can say the face is the billboard of the heart. Amanda Knox. Accused of the murder of her roommate in Italy. She was condemned, then exonerated and freed on DNA evidence by the Supreme Court after 8 years in jail. She was mismatched during the entire process. Foxy Knoxy, as they nicknamed her in Italy, looked like a liar while she was telling the truth. The Italian media portrayed her a prostitute and put out a long list of boyfriends, which was a fabrication. She was painted the villain because she fed the description of the person who has committed a murder. She didn't show emotion and seemed not to really care about the situation she was in and felt not concerned. She wasn't grieving the loss of her roommate. They stereotyped her as cold and calculating, and at the end, the Italian opinion was intolerant with Amanda Knox. She was thrown into the mud because she looked like, acted like, and behaved like someone who is guilty. She was an immature young woman. She came from a different culture. That's what the police and Italian judicial system didn't understand at the time. The whole world judged her based on the expression on her face, which turned out to be the wrong thing to do. Case study: the fraternity party. A Kappa Alpha party went wrong in a university campus and a young woman, Emily Doe, got assaulted. An investigation was opened to determine if what turned out to be an incident was consensual at the beginning or not, because the two people involved was intoxicated. The case came to be known as the People versus Brock Turner. According to the male student, the encounter was consensual. At the end, Turner was found guilty as his account was deemed incoherent. Alcohol as a factor in this case was also on trial with Brock Turner. Alcohol inhibits the capacity of our senses and one won't even understand the true meaning of oneself. Alcohol is an agent of transformation. Later after, we witnessed the British version of Brock Turner's case. Two people heavily drunk had sex. When she became sober and recounting some part of the encounter, she called her best friend and told her about what happened. The man ended up in jail as the lady said the intercourse wasn't consensual because she was impaired by alcohol and didn't know what was going on. The chilling part is young women's interest to alcohol nowadays trying to equate with young men. It's an immature decision even though it isn't criminal. Lessons. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, KSM, what happened when a stranger is a terrorist? Two intelligence investigators, James Mitchell and Bruce Jason, are interrogating terrorists. It is a daunting and challenging task. 2 rounds of interrogators have preceded them, and all have failed to get anything out of KSM. They're known for being experts in enhanced interrogative techniques such as walling, sleep deprivation, waterboarding and much more. If a detainee is reluctant to answer questions, they will start with walling, sleep deprivation, and the ultimate technique was waterboarding for hard-headed terrorists. But KSM was unbreakable. He survived waterboarding for weeks before changing course and succumbing to torture. He finally confessed with astonishing details his involvement in the September 11 terrorist attack on U.S. soil. But the question is, was he telling the truth after he has gone through tough interrogation techniques that have certainly affected his way of thinking or reasoning? Sylvia Plath. Author of Live or Die, she committed suicide at age 30 for an unthinkable reason. As a poet, she wrote about suicide and was obsessed about it. She has tried it before, and because she was rejected by a man she adored, she decided to take her own life. The method she used in her suicide action was very common in Europe. Just like her friend Plath, Anne Sexton also committed suicide in her car and died of carbon monoxide intoxication. And since that time, the US government instructed automobile makers to install catalytic converter designed to burn out carbon monoxide before being released into the air. The leading technique of suicide in those days in Europe was gas tank. In the US, handgun is the preferred suicide method of choice. Two terms come into play when it comes to suicide: displacement and coupling. Kansas City experiment. 3 groups of neighborhoods, one the control group with no police presence at all, the second group with a little police presence basically on call, and a third group with massive presence of police officers. George Kelling's experiment was set up and numbers were collected. After a year, it did not matter about the presence or no presence of police, crime was taking place at the same rate. Instead, crime was going up year after year. Then came Lawrence Sherman's experiment. He focused his experiment in the hottest part of the city where crime was 20 times higher than national average. The plan was to put in place community policing, and police went towards people, and the result was contrasted after 3 months. In fact, people barricaded themselves in their homes and stayed away from streets. Crime went down not because of community policing but because people stayed indoor. The third experiment based on traffic stop and gun search was the right strategy, and crime was cut in half. The result was outstanding from just 4 police officers. They were more effective than the entire police department in the space of 200 days. Sandra Bland. YouTube channel Sandy Speaks, arrested by Officer Brian Insignia, jailed, then committed suicide in her jail cell. Brian Insignia was fired for violating Texas State Trooper Code of Conduct. Insignia may have racially profiled Bland. He followed her because she has violated a stop sign in the campus ground where he didn't have the authority to pull her over. He pushed her to making a mistake, especially she had an Illinois license plate. He noticed she was agitated and thought she was suspicious about something. Insignia evidently mismatched Sandra Bland. She was scared about her life. She was a troubled person, but the police officer didn't know her well and misjudged her.